what a session we have lined up for you to wrap it up. We have an excellent fireside chat with one of India's finest journalists, Padma Bhushan awardee, Mr. Shekhar Gupta, the founder and editor-in-chief of ThePrint. He was earlier the editor-in-chief of Indian Express, and while he was holding that position, he was also the CEO of the newspaper for 13 years. Today, he will share with us his views about the changing face of journalism, and joining him on stage for a fireside chat is Chhavi Leekha, Associate Vice President, Corporate Communications and Brand Reputation, IndiGo Airlines. Thank you.
Very good evening, actually good afternoon to all of you. Without further ado, we all know who Shekhar is. We'll straight away launch into our agenda for the day, which is the changing face of journalism. Welcome, Shekhar, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to chat with you. So quickly, just getting on to with the changing face of journalism and with this whole influx of social media, would really like to understand from you how it has impacted journalism. I know everything has its pros and cons, but where do you think the balance tilts with this one?
Well, first of all, I have to say I'm thrilled to be here. This is the neighborhood where I had my first job between 1977 to 83, when this was actually an industrial area. So Ramnath Goenka, in his usual parsimonious ways, found a rundown old factory building. The factory had shut down, and that became the office of the Indian Express. So which was about 3 minutes walking distance from here. Second, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm only unhappy about one thing, and I must state that up front. That is when I look at all these logos on the wall, right? And I know that you PR marketing wallahs get all the sponsorships for yourselves. How come I never can organize an event that has so many logos to display?
Speak to Amit. There he goes.
So, and third, it is serendipitous because you asked me about social media. It's almost to date, until 8 years ago, I was not using any social media. I had no idea of using any social media. I was not on any social media. I had been editor and CEO of the Express for 19 years already, and a full-time journalist for 37 years, but I didn't know how social media works. And one day, the gentleman sitting in the front row there, Amit Prabhu, he picked up my iPad when he had brought some World Economic Forum people for a meeting at the Oberoi, and he picked up my iPad and he said, I'm setting up a Twitter account for you. And I don't want to be on Twitter because it's a pain. So he set it up, and I think for several weeks, he's the only one who had access to that account. So he was running that account. And he said, you can take it back from me any day you feel like. So if you go and see the people I follow, he is the first name I follow.
Now we know who to catch.
So social media, it's a good question. Social media is good and bad. It's mostly good unless you start to enjoy the bad side of it. And the bad side of it has a wide range. It is from running down others or abusing others. Or maybe I should start this side of the pendulum swing. It ranges from self-promotion. Look at me, I'm eating a banana. The whole world eats a banana, right? Look at me, I'm eating an ice cream. People say, wow, right? So that's one end. The other end is using social media to demonize people. The worst is using social media. The worst aspect of social media is that it becomes a kind of mob censorship. So picking up the thread from what Gul was saying, if a lot of people don't like what you're saying, a lot of them will then on social media judge you for it. And the idea is to get you to be so mentally destroyed that you then say, look, this is not a panga I want to take. Because social media is now the new form, much more magnified form of log kya kahenge. So it takes time for people to figure it out.
So Shekhar, taking on from what you're saying, कि लोग क्या कहेंगे, it is also about कि लोग तो इतना कुछ कह रहे हैं. How does that impact journalism? Considering that news travels at the speed of nanoseconds on social media or digital media, any incident could become viral in less than a few minutes. Does that impact journalism in any way? Or does that impact, let me rephrase that question to say, does that impact the bias of what is reported by the journalist today?
Well, it does, and that's why you will find that at least legacy media organizations all over the world who take their brands seriously and who take their image seriously, they are now being very firm with their journalists' use of social media. So whether it's the New York Times, Washington Post, FT, The Economist, they all have this struggle. And not all of them have the kind of dictatorial powers that some of the Indian legacy media organizations have. For example, the Times of India group now has a very firm law. So you cannot share, if you are an employee at the Times of India group, you cannot share any journalism done by anybody from any other group. And it's followed. In India today, also they have the same rule. It's followed, but there are some people who have the privilege to break the rule because they are seen to be so valuable because they are so quote unquote Modi government friendly that you give them a lot more leeway. People like us keep lecturing people and we say that look, Twitter doesn't pay your salaries. Facebook doesn't pay your salaries. Whatever else comes up doesn't pay your salaries. So speak through your journalism. This is not your journalism. And what you put on social media is serious stuff because if you are a journalist, anything you publish is journalism. So with limited success, I would say, but we keep trying. At the same time, it's a big force multiplier. It's an incredible force multiplier. You can spread the word very quickly. If today at ThePrint, which will be 5 years old in 15 days from now, we are now averaging 15 million, 16 million visitors a month without any promotion and without doing any of the snakes marrying trees kind of stories or Tendue ka root canal. I know that even leopards need root. I mean, if they get good dental care, they must get good dental care. But it wasn't even a story about a proper root canal. It was a story about on a Hindi channel about what if a leopard was put through root canal. Now I have to have one on Thursday, and I wish I was a leopard and I could bite off the dentist's hand. But so it also trivializes news, and I find employers and editors now say, "अच्छा तुम इसका देखो Twitter following कितना है, इसका देखो etc." So these are things that all of us have to navigate. So when I was leaving the Express, my farewell article was headlined 8614. That was the only headline. And why was it called 8614? Because the whole article was reflecting on this new world that we were now confronted with, world of social media. And it was also partly a selfish explanation of why I was not using anything on social media. And I said I refuse to be on Twitter because I follow the words of George Clooney that I can't risk an entire career on 140 characters, right? But sure enough, within months, Amit got me there. And so these are things you learn. This is not something that you can stay out of. So I'd rather go with the force multiplier side of it and not worry about the rest. And as far as trolling, I ban, one thing editors can do is ban the use of some words on their publications. So I have banned, among the words I have banned is troll. We don't call anybody a troll. Like, once you call somebody a troll, you put a label. After that, there is no discourse left. So the professor I worked closely with in strategic studies, he used to ban 2 words for his students: superpower and third world. Because he said, once you put somebody in that basket, superpower or third world, then your capacity for critical analysis is over. So similarly, don't call anybody a troll, don't call anybody a bhakt. It is not needed.
You know, I have to add here, it's actually very exciting to be on the other side of the table. Normally, it's the journalist interviewing the corporate, and otherwise, I think I'm experiencing this for the first time, so really enjoying it, guys. Coming back to you, Shekhar. You know, so I understand there is this whole widespread percolation, news travels at the speed of light, almost. But how do you deal with the accuracy and in understanding of reportage? So what do people, corporates who are at the receiving end of it, how are we supposed to understand this? How do we deal with it?
See, I see this frustration expressed all the time, not just from corporates, but from governments, armed forces, intelligence agencies, that, you know, what is your accountability, right? Who's to hold you accountable? Now, what is the answer to that? Will you let the government hold you accountable? I have sometimes views which are difficult to explain. For example, I am not in favor of Editors Guild of India becoming members or having representatives on Press Council of India. So all this while, even for the 2 years when I headed Editors Guild of India, I said, no, we will not be members on the Press Council of India, because Press Council of India is an organization set up by under an act of Parliament, and it is run by the government. Appointments are made by the government. Anything they say then has the thappa of government. I don't believe it. I don't trust it. And how can we have the guild put its stamp of approval? My successors have chosen to do it, so these are choices people make. We must never let anybody in the government establishment hold us accountable for anything, and least of all the corporates. But corporates have the power that governments don't have. Corporates have very well-paid lawyers. And see how Adani handles criticism. See how Anil Ambani handled criticism. See how ITC handles criticism. ITC is a big advertiser. Levers is a big advertiser. They don't like anything published anywhere. They wipe out an entire generation of the owners of that paper or publication by not advertising there. If you make a list of the organizations that ITC has blackballed, and they get away with it. Is anybody here from ITC? Right? They get away with it. I mean, look at the absurdity of what's going on in India. There is a massive campaign against smoking. Every year, Government of India says that now your warnings on cigarette packets will become even starker, right? All that goes on. Yet we are the only country, only sovereign country in the world, and a democracy no less, where the government holds more than 10% shares in the premier tobacco making company of the country. Bharat Sarkar owns more than 10% of ITC. It continues to own it, not because it's very profitable to own it, but so that the local management can be protected from their owners. This is a scandal. And how much questioning do you see in the media? So corporates actually do very well. And some of the others file cases, 1 place, 2nd place, 3rd place, 4th place. How many journalists and how many media organizations can go to 20 places? And I find even well-to-do media organizations are not willing to do it. They corporate, na, kuch kar lo uske saath mein. So I don't think corporates deserve to complain. I don't think the governments deserve to complain. I think the readers and viewers should complain. And they can complain. And then that is why they must have choices. Choices are very important because so many mythologies are spread in the media or through the media. And today media being so sort of polarized that everybody makes up their own facts. And if you don't join any of the mobs, so it's a bit like that. Look at the media today. Half the people, this is not my line, this is Barkha Dutt's line, so credit where it's due. Half the media looks like Chamcha. Other half looks like Morcha. Right? So Chamchas and Morchas are both sitting in their bunkers and just firing on top of each other, but they are in their bunkers, nothing happens. Then people like us who try and do real journalism, we walk in the open ground between them. So we are caught in the sniper's alley from both sides. But you know, if you've been around long enough, this is part of life, you deal with it. So you know, if anybody takes the car to Delhi, you are sure to find one truck if you keep your eyes open at the back of it, which says, "Chalti hai gaadi, udti hai dhool, jalte hai dushman, khilte hai phool." So, so I think if you have that approach, you're okay.
No, so you have actually brought me to our next question. So you talked about polarization amongst the media. Given that scenario between the, the chamchas and the morchas, do you think we actually have unbiased reportage today? Do you think there is unbiased reporting that exists in the world of journalism today? And for the readers too.
First of all, this is a full toss. I can't but hit it for something that counts for something. I mean, if there was no space for decent reportage, why would 15 million people come to us in 1 month at zero promotion, right? So there is a large market for that. It may not be as much fun. It may not be. I also want to, if I get really bored in the evening, I put on one of these warrior channels and I watch it on mute. And I can actually speak everybody's lines in these discussions. I practice it and I get it right. So you do those things for entertainment also. But there is space for everything. There is also space for polarized journalism. After all, if you see The Guardian and Telegraph, Daily Telegraph, that is polarized journalism. But readers know who's coming from where. So as long as you know that, you can handle it.
Sure, and there is a different set of ethos with each publication. As a reader, we kind of decipher them at our own end, but as a journalist, and with the changes that it's bringing in, how do the journalists react to the ethos of a publication? For example, what Times of India reports is very different to what maybe an Indian Express does. So how does it kind of redefine the journalist and the reportage that's emerging from there?
See, first of all, there has to be a reason why, having been a full-time journalist, full-time salary-paid journalist for 37 years, for now the past 8 years I haven't been paid a salary. And every time I think about it, I remember the line that Nassim Nicholas Taleb spoke. He said many memorable things. But I think his most memorable line was, the 3 worst addictions in life are sugar, which this has some of, right? Sugar, heroin, and a monthly paycheck, right? So 8 years I've lived without a monthly paycheck. But I never thought of working for the Times also. Except I was a stringer for them when I was a journalism student. It was the emergency. I was a sports stringer for them. So occasionally sports, big tournaments happened. So I got to cover the finals of All India Tennis Championship in the year that Kiran Bedi became national champion for the first time, defeating Nirupama Mankad, and that tournament took place on the courts at our Punjab University campus. And the same year, Ramesh Krishnan beat his father to become champion. So, Times, and I was once asked by somebody who matters in the Times that how come, in fact, the person said, "Shekhar bhai, ek din to hamare liye kaam karna hi hai." And I did say that, sometimes you get a good answer on the spot. And I said, wo nahi hoga because aapke hamare skills mein mismatch hai. Because he said, are you judging us that we are not a good journalistic organization? I said, no, there is a complete mismatch in our skills. So I was asked to explain. I said, aapki skill hai, hamari skill hai story chhapna, newspaper chhapna. Aapki skill hai note chhapna. You print money, we print newspapers. So every organization has its own ethos. So I worked for 2 organizations in my life. With the Express in 2 spells, 6 years and 19 years, and 12 years in the middle in India Today, during the glory years of India Today. So I'm quite spoiled. I'm quite spoiled also to have had great editors and great proprietors.
You talked about paychecks, so sort of picking up the word pay from there. Do you think we as Indians, so there are a lot of paywalls that have come up. During COVID, we all became used to receiving news on our mobiles. We were not touching newspapers, etc. And now suddenly we have paywalls that have emerged to access these basic news. Do you think we as Indians are ready to pay up for getting a daily dose of news?
See, 1 week before the 75th Independence Day, I have to be careful joking about freedom and all that. But we are a country of freedom fighters. Why? Because we want everything for free, right? You are sitting in a city where one state government today is taking pride. I saw Arvind Kejriwal's tweets on the way saying, oh, fantastic, Punjabis, your bills, your electricity bills are zero bills. That means you are getting everything for free. And I said, Punjabis were supposed to be very proud, self-respecting people. You are throwing 300 units of free power at them. What happened to Punjabi's self-esteem? So people want everything free. So media will have that challenge. People will pay for the New York Times, FT, etc., etc. Enough people. I mean, not millions will not pay in India. But the reason Washington Post is doing so much opinion from India right now is because they get subscriptions in India. But Indian media will struggle, and that's the reason we are not yet behind a paywall. So we ask for voluntary subscriptions, and people who subscribe, we give them additional benefits. We give them newsletters and things, and we'll give them more. But even now, we don't particularly want to lose so much of the readership.
Sure. Touching on another aspect, and we discussed this yesterday.
Am I audible, or am I holding the mic too close or too far? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so touching upon the other aspect, which is about usage of data, or data journalism as we call it. We discussed this yesterday with one of the authors, Rukmini, who talked about how data is, so real data is kind of hidden or taken away from public eyes, and how the data which the administration wants is kind of spread around for people to understand what India should be or is. What the real India is, we really don't know. So what's your view on that? And how can we use data better for journalism?
Well, I see Rukmani sitting right here. So if you've heard from her, I can add very little to it. All I will tell you is that this is part of the evolution of journalism. Journalism started, say about 20 years back, it was purely source-based and access-based. Then access began to dry up, because one after the other, as more strongmen leaders began to rise, and when I say strongmen, I say in a gender-neutral sense, because Mayawati, Mamta Banerjee, they are no different. So they all, and I'm looking at Indian leaders, but this happened globally also, in democracies, that leaders figured out that it's a big power to deny, access is a big power with the media. And soon enough, sports people caught it. Sachin Tendulkar, who I am a fan of. In fact, I have a picture, among the few pictures on my wall, is a picture from December 1989 in Lahore, when Indian cricket team was traveling there, and Sachin was making his debut. So there was a picture when its players, Manjrekar and the rest got together, and because Sachin wasn't yet shaving, they put a fake mustache on, and I think they put lipstick on my face and stuff. It's a fancy dress kind of thing. So I'm a fan of his. And I found that when I used to be hosting that Walk the Talk on NDTV for a long time, I just couldn't get Sachin Tendulkar to say yes. And then how come, everybody's featured on Walk the Talk? I get calls from people, including Sachin's contemporaries in the team, who so desperate, who so keenly wanted to be on it. And Sachin was always ducking it. So I even got it across to him through influential people who he knows and who I know. And they said, but he's got a block in the head about you. So, so I did run into him once, and he said, look, I'm a straightforward person. I'll be straightforward with you. I was told by one of the reporters who left you that you fired him because I was not willing to write, and he was not willing to write anything against Tendulkar. Right? Now, anybody who leaves you unhappily has a story to tell. Nobody says, I left because I didn't do any work, except hanging in the staircase and smoking. Right? But this is almost 20 years back. So cancel culture hasn't come in right now. And then he said, no, now that we have met, thoda aanki sharam hoti hai, so now that we have met. So we recorded a 2-part walk the talk in Shivaji Park in Mumbai, which is brilliant. And you can see not a sign of any tension there. So access is power now. Anybody, film stars know it, corporates know it, right? You know, I mean, all of you work for corporates, you know which journalists or which papers, which corporate leader wants to patronize and which one they want to avoid. It's a well-known thing. So in this situation, data is our power. It's just that most of us have not trained to use data because our editors are not trained to use data. So it's a very new skill for us. And that's why we need new data journalists who can make sense of what it is. And governments have not realized it. Particularly this government has realized that data empowers journalists. So either stop the flow of data, that's why you are not seeing a census yet, and we don't know when the census will take place. And second, they also manufacture their own data. So CMIE, for example, comes up with data showing very bad job figures. But you can come up with some other data and say this is better. These are better figures. And a former chief economic advisor, who is a good economist, he's now writing. I think he wrote it in his column in Times of India also, that all this impression that India is short of jobs, this has been spread by flawed data from CMIE. But there is no data to counter it. So I will just conclude the answer by quoting what Narayan Murthy has been saying for a long time. He says, in God we trust, the rest of you bring data.
From walk the talk to cut the clutter, you've met all kinds of people from all walks of life. Who would be the most memorable? We just heard about Tendulkar and the story, but which stint or which interview that you did that you remember the most, let's say?
Well, I thought, first of all, I got a fright. I thought you will ask me from walk the talk to cut the clutter, what has changed. But I shall tell you what has changed. And I find it great fun. I mean, I'm really loving it because walk the talk, 80% of the talking was done by the other guy. Now I get to do 100% of the talking. So
yeah, I didn't want to get there.
You love the sound of your own voice. But to say which one was most interesting is tough because there were so many. There were more than 500. So it's like, your memory is so selective. Flavors stay with your life, right? So sometimes the flavor of something reminds you of something that happened in your life. Anytime I walk past a bakery, right, where say fresh cakes are being baked. I remember the first school I went to in Ambala. It was a convent. It was the only English medium school I went to, but only for 3 months. But I remember that the school bakery, and that's the convent that was bombed in the 65 war and had its cathedral blown off, those flavors stick. So when you walk past flavors, memories come, and so flavor of the day decides who's the most favorite. So if you ask me, who is the most boring, I can tell you. Right.
Okay, let's get to hear that then.
So the most boring by far, was a British minister called Vince Cable. Vince Cable was the minister for trade and industry, but I thought something was wrong with me, right? It was so boring. And he had succeeded somebody in the same job who was so much fun, Peter Mendelssohn. So I thought, what have the Brits done to themselves? And they get rid of Peter Mendelssohn, who's so much fun, and they put this guy there, right? But most interesting is a tougher thing. So if I come into Chandigarh, the smells of Chandigarh, I'd say Milkha Singh. But even more than Milkha Singh, Chandigarh had another great sports person that I'm sure if any of you says that they remember that sports person or have heard about him, I'll say fantastic, right? His name was Balbir Singh. Now, Balbir Singh was a triple gold medalist in hockey, right? In the International Olympic Committee Hall of Fame. He's one of the 16 greatest athletes of all times listed. along with Jesse Owens and all. He used to live in Chandigarh. 1948, Melbourne, World Cup, 52, Helsinki, World Cup, 56, I forget where it was. No, 48 was London, Helsinki, and 56, Melbourne. And the last two, he was captain. 1975, the last time India won the Hockey World Cup, he was the coach and the manager of the team. And there are great stories about him. Until mid-70s, this is India's political history is woven with Indian sport also, but more hockey than cricket. And hockey nobody bothers about anymore. Until the mid-70s, Indian hockey did not trust Muslims. So almost no Muslim had turned out to play for India because India's main rival was Pakistan. In late 60s, India's finest forward was a man called Inamur Rahman. He was not fielded in the Olympics in 68 and 72 at Mexico and Munich because they wouldn't trust a Muslim. And India, that is when India stopped getting into the finals. Now, 75 Kuala Lumpur World Cup, India had a Muslim player, Aslam Sher Khan, who was a defender and who could also hit a penalty corner. Now, Balbir Singh knew that if the Pakistanis are able to cover the other penalty corner specialist, that was Surjit Singh, I think, then he will need to call in Aslam. But nobody trusted a Muslim. There was a suspicion. So day before the game, he took the entire Indian team to the mosque in Kuala Lumpur. He took them to a temple, he took them to a gurdwara, took them to a mosque. And he tells you the story that as we were coming out of the mosque, we saw the Pakistani coach bringing in his team. And Pakistani coach and Balbir had been contemporaries. And Pakistani coach said, "Aaj to Allah se aap hi pehle maang ke le gaye." And in the match, in semi-final, when India were about to lose, India needed an equalizer. India got a penalty corner. He sent Michael Kindo out, and he brought in Aslam Sher Khan. And all of us remember that picture. He picked up his amulet, kissed it, took the hit, and scored a goal. So in that moment, he changed the way Indian hockey looked at Muslims. After that, you've had Muslim captains of Indian hockey, Mohammad Shahid and the rest. So that man lived here, and nobody remembered him. He died, I think, last year at the age of 93, 94. So those are things that you remember, and those were incredible. And I don't think I would have gotten this far into his life but for the fact that I had walked the talk to do, and nobody asked me who I was featuring there. So I tell you stories.
So we love your stories, and here's to, given the paucity of time, here's one last question, Shekhar. From Walk the Talk, where we were doing autobiographical, if I may use that word, about people and their lives, to, let's say, cutting the clutter, to your own passion, which is political commentary. How do you kind of see the change? So I was coming to that question. What has changed, and what is the purview that you kind of look, or what is the lens that you view the Indian economy and overall journalism with today?
See, first of all, it's important to stay curious. And to stay curious, you have to have the humility to accept that I don't know everything. Because the day you think that I know everything and I don't have to be curious about anything, then you become a potted plant. You start vegetating. So what keeps you going is, every day there's a surprise. I knew so little about something. So that political journalism was something that I entered a bit late, because I was with India Today and I was doing all kinds of things. I was covering a lot of wars that were more fun, because all the competition in India Today used to be about cover stories, right? So at that point, Punjab terrorism was on, Northeast trouble was on. So those were all the cover stories: war in Sri Lanka, war in the Gulf, breakdown of Soviet Union. So I wasn't doing politics. So late S.P. Singh, who I became friends with in the early 90s, he told me that if you really want to grow as editor, you must move on to doing mainstream politics. And sometimes he would even drag me to Sitaram Kesari's home. and he would say that if you want to learn Indian politics, you must spend time with someone like Sitaram Kesri, who was a Dada. So once you understand politics, then that becomes a very good window into much else, because everything in our lives is run by politics. So that's been a very important part of the evolution. And I find now that's very useful, because most people think that there was no history before Google, right? Everything that's happening today started before Google. And there's also a whole lot of people who think that nothing was happening in India before 2014. The fact is that everything that's happened after 2014 was happening before 2014, right? So it's important to work on that knowledge base.
Thank you, Shekhar. It's been wonderful talking to you. Anecdotal to understanding that we need to stay curious, that we need to keep our ears glued to the ground, that corporates have an advantage when it comes to dealing with journalism. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. And since, again, because it's the rainy season, I know I've got a minute and a half, so I'm not letting go. Since it's the rainy season and you asked about favorite walk the talks. So there was another one with Ustad Bismillah Khan in Varanasi. And it's the only episode of Walk the Talk for which we paid. We paid means for which I paid. Because I went to see him the previous day and he said, Baba se baat karne aaye ho, nazrana nahi doge. So, because he was a Bharat Ratna, but he was very hard up because he had his hundreds of family members leeching on him. He was very poor. So I said, no, I can't pay you, but what I'll do is, NDTV won't pay, and as principal we won't pay, but I will pay you the equivalent of my fee for one episode. So I went to an ATM there, and I took out the money, and I gave to him. And this was a walk the talk done with him lying on the cot with the Shehnai by his side. And I asked him, Baba, आप पाकिस्तान क्यों नहीं चले गए जब आपसे जाने को कहा? तो इसे कहते थे चले जाओ, तो मैंने कहा वहाँ आपके पास बनारस है? तो मैंने कहा लेकिन आप यहाँ कैसे करते हैं? आप तो भैरवी गाते हैं? कहते हैं हाँ भैरवी गाते हैं, वो शिव भगवान के आशीर्वाद के बिना नहीं हो सकता। तो मैं मुसलमान हूँ, उन्होंने मुझे मंदिर में जाने से मना कर दिया, अब लेकिन शिव जी के वरदान के बिना तो भैरवी हो ही नहीं सकती। तो मैं क्या करता था? यू कैन वॉच इट, इट्स देयर। मैं मंदिर के पीछे जाता था, वो दीवार है, दीवार के उस तरफ शिव जी हैं, शिव जी को क्या फर्क पड़ता है दीवार से? तो मैं बाहर से दीवार को हाथ लगाता था, शिव जी इसका आशीर्वाद लेता था और उसके बाद में भैरवी बजाता था। So those are things that you remember. So
thank you once again, Shekhar.